Scotland. It could be Scotland's hottest day on record, as well as the UK's hottest day, and Wales and England, everywhere except for Northern Ireland, where high 20s are expected. Some showers come along later on Tuesday from the southwest, and that marks a change back to more typical weather for the UK. So a showery day on Wednesday, bright spells to end the week, and temperatures much closer to average.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
It's hot and I've been keeping a low profile, but I'm back. Welcome to another week of On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and it is indeed good to be here after a holiday. For the next hour, we'll be talking about the economic conundrum at the heart of this Tory leadership battle. Are tax cuts inflationary, as former Chancellor Rishi Sunak claims, or should the Tories be lowering taxes, as the other leadership hopefuls suggest? As ever, we hold a detailed discussion with people who really know their stuff. On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It's just 1 minute past 1. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The body of a 13-year-old boy has been found after he was last seen in the River Tyne near Ovingham in Northumberland. A Met Office red extreme heat warning has come into effect for much of England and Wales, as temperatures are forecast to hit up to 40 degrees centigrade. Police have warned of the dangers of bathing in open water to keep cool. Schools in several counties, including Nottinghamshire and Hampshire, have closed, or they'll finish early today. Cancellations have been announced on the rail network, and some speed restrictions are in place. Network Rail says people should only travel if absolutely necessary. Meteorologist John Hammond told us the telltale signs to look out for heat stroke.
It's confusion, it's dizziness, it's nausea, it's headaches, and it's obviously sweatiness. But those are the symptoms of heat stress. The worry is that heat stress can quickly progress into heat exhaustion, and when that happens, you actually stop sweating. So your mechanism for getting rid of heat from the body closes down, and then your body just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. That's heat stroke, and that can be incredibly serious, and you have to rush people to the hospital at very short notice at that point.
The heat waves across the continent. Authorities in Spain and Portugal say more than 1,000 people have been killed in the high temperatures, which have lasted nearly a week. Firefighters are also battling fire in France and Greece. Conditions have been exacerbated by the dry, hot weather. In Spain, a firefighter has been killed while tackling fires in the northwestern province of Zamora, while the body of a farmer has been found in an area of scorched land. Political news in the UK, and the field of candidates in the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader will be whittled down again today as Tory MPs vote in the third secret ballot of the contest. Voting takes place between 5 and 7 this evening, with the results expected at 8. The candidate with the fewest votes will be eliminated. A third televised debate that had been due to take place tomorrow night between the remaining candidates has been cancelled because Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have declined to take part. Sky News had been due to host it. They say Conservative MPs are said to be concerned about the damage the debates are doing to the image of the party.
I'm astonished that those that want to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom are pulling out of debates and out of scrutiny. I can see, based on what I've seen in debates so far, why they want to do so, because this is a party that is out of ideas, out of purpose. They're tearing each other apart. But as I say, pulling out of a TV debate when you want to be Prime Minister doesn't show very much confidence.
That's the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, speaking there. Now, the government's facing a confidence vote in Parliament today amid calls for Boris Johnson to leave number 10 immediately. If the government's defeated, it would almost certainly trigger a general election. However, this is unlikely. A significant number of Conservative MPs would have to vote against the government or abstain. Unusually, the motion's taking place as a government one rather than the opposition's. The government refused to accept the original wording of Labour's vote of no confidence. The head of Ukraine's spy agency and the top state prosecutor have been suspended while an investigation takes place after dozens of people in their organisation were found to be collaborating with Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky said they had to take responsibility for more than 650 cases of treason which have been opened against their staff. He said more than 60 people from both departments are now working against Ukraine in Russia-occupied territories. A Conservative police and crime commissioner has been banned from driving for 6 months for repeatedly speeding. Caroline Henry was caught breaking a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit 5 times in 12 weeks. She was elected as Nottinghamshire's police and crime commissioner in May 2021 and had pledged to crack down on speeding. European bison have been introduced into woods in Kent, where their ancestors used to roam. It's hoped they're going to restore the woods and make them more resilient to climate change with their natural behaviour, grazing, felling trees, eating bark and taking dust baths. It's the first time in thousands of years that bison have roamed freely in Britain, where they're expected to be joined by Exmoor ponies, Iron Age pigs and Longhorn cattle. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Liam for today's On the Money.
Tax cuts would be inflationary, says Tory leadership frontrunner Rishi Sunak, and those proposing to slash tax are indulging in the fantasy economics of unfunded promises. Is the former Chancellor correct? Or, with the tax burden heading for its highest level since the Second World War, is it time to lower taxes? We hold a detailed discussion. Plus, we'll be examining new polling evidence that suggests lots of you think the Prime Minister should prioritise tackling Britain's rising poverty levels above all else when the new face finally enters number 10. And each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we hear from Michael Stewart. He'll be telling us all about his new Made in Britain social media platform, YouView, designed to allow millions of creative people to showcase their work, not least Generation Z. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. Do you think tax cuts are harmful to the economy? Or would you welcome keeping a few extra pounds in your pocket? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money. From the very start, last night's Tory leadership debate had tax cuts centre stage. In her opening statement, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss vowed to scrap next year's corporation tax rise, remove renewable household energy levies and reverse Rishi's national insurance increase. Kemi Badenoch, she proposed an emergency budget. And Penny Mordaunt stressed families need immediate help now. Why doesn't Rishi get that? The former Chancellor stood his ground throughout, arguing against tax cuts accusing other prime ministerial hopefuls of following the fantasy economics of unfunded promises. Sunak argued last night, as he has throughout this leadership contest, that tax cuts would stoke inflation, making the cost of living crisis worse. But Truss and the other candidates think not. They argue that taxes need to come down sharpish, so households can keep more money and to help businesses struggling to survive. Now, if you slash taxes across the board and ramp up borrowing unduly, then sure, as Sunak says, the surge in demand and debt could spark yet more inflation. But I'd say that targeted tax cuts would help tackle the cost of living crisis. The former Chancellor's already legislated to raise corporation tax from 19 to 25% next year. Scrap that and businesses would be able to survive, or more of them. That would boost supply, so helping to lower inflation. Reversing April's rise in national insurance, seen by many as a tax on jobs, would also help hard-pressed households. And many Tories and others also want green levies on household utility bills scrapped or suspended. They currently account for around a quarter of current electricity bills. Sunak's right that if tax cuts lead to more borrowing and government debt, that could lead to higher interest payments and a heavier burden for future generations. But compared to quite a few other larger economies, the UK's government debt burden actually looks quite reasonable at the moment. Take Italy's government debt to GDP ratio, what the government owes compared to the overall size of the economy. That's a whopping 151%. America's also heavily indebted, with 126% debt to GDP. The French government's debt burden amounts to 113% of annual economic output. But in the UK, that same ratio is 88%, actually among the lowest of the major industrialised economies. The reality is the UK now has the highest levels of taxation since the Second World War. At least that's where we're heading, according to Rishi Sunak's last budget. And for my money, an economy weighed down by tax is a low-growth economy at a time when growth is desperately needed. I would say that whatever Sunak says, the next Tory Prime Minister should be committing to tax cuts, some of them immediate, putting money back into the pockets of consumers and firms. And that's our on-the-money question today. Is Sunak right? Are tax cuts inflationary? Grown-up discussions with people who know their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. Talking of which, I'm delighted today to be joined in the studio by Roger Bootle, founder of Capital Economics and author of the AI Economy, Work, Wealth and Welfare in the Age of the Robot. Great to have you with us, Roger. Andrew O'Brien, Director of External Affairs at Social Enterprise UK, is also with us, as indeed she's back. Helen Thomas, CEO of Blonde Money. Always great to see you, Helen. Roger, let's turn to you first, if I may. You've got a lot of experience at the top of policy making. You're one of Britain's leading economists. You've written a powerful column in the Daily Telegraph today saying that Rishi may be being a bit overcautious. Why do you think that?
Well, I'm in the awkward and unusual position of being sort of in the middle on this question. As you indicated earlier on, I think Rishi is right to say that there are limits. There are things you could do which would worsen the inflationary problem. And in the medium term, I'm very clear about this, lower taxes, which I support with you, lower taxes means you've got to get control of government spending, indeed cut it as a share of GDP. But in the immediate future, I think there's scope actually to relax taxes a bit, even without cutting spending.
There's something called the Laffer curve, isn't there? This notion, famous economist Arthur Laffer drew it on the back of a napkin. If you actually lower tax rates, it means you get more tax revenue in if that lower rate stimulates growth, particularly for something like corporation tax. And corporation tax isn't just about big businesses. Kebab shops pay corporation tax, plumbers pay corporation tax, tiny building companies pay corporation tax.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with the Laffer curve, it's very seductive, is you never know quite where you are on the curve. So what he said was, there are points on the curve where you can cut tax rates and you actually get more revenue, which is lovely, isn't it? But given that you don't know where you are, the temptation, I'm afraid, for all these contenders for the top job now is to believe you are on that point of the Laffer curve where you can cut tax rates and the money just pours in. I'm very sceptical about that, I have to say. I'm much more, I think, with you, of the view that if you cut taxes in today's world, then some point in the medium term, you will be strengthening economic growth and it will finance itself, I think, in the medium term. I'm not convinced it'll finance itself over the next year or so. So I think cutting taxes now means accepting that you're going to have slightly higher borrowing. But I would do that because, as you say, you can't be overconfident about this, but, the debt ratio is not disastrous, and I think the cost of living crisis is disastrous.
Helen Thomas, you used to work for George Osborne, who, of course, was then long-standing Tory Chancellor. You're generally, philosophically, somebody who's pro-enterprise, pro-low tax, but you're a bit more cautious than Roger, aren't you, on this question?
I think tax cuts, the focus on this can sometimes lead us to forget what's really going on. And so here's the thing. We often talk about tax policy based on, a business cycle. And inflation can tend to suggest that things are overheating. But what we're seeing now is, and you've talked about this before, is what economists call stagflation, where it's weighing on growth at the same time as the inflation.
Inflation and stagnation.
Exactly. And that really is a horrible, toxic mess, and politicians understandably hate it. It is difficult to get out of. But what you need to look at with that, then, is the fact that we're in a completely different economy. This is what's happening right now. This is why it is such a thorny question. We've had a pandemic, we've got a war, and a technological revolution that's been sped up and all compressed into 3 years. Now, as a result of that, some parts of the economy are doing brilliantly and some are doing very badly. So, therefore, sort of blanket tax cuts cannot be the answer to this. That is, you're turning up to, the patient in hospital recovering from a coma and you're just flooding them with all sorts of drugs, whereas really you need to sit there and say, well, what is this patient now capable of? Are they still a marathon runner or are they a novelist? It's going to be different as to what you prescribe.
I'm with you, Helen. I don't believe in ideologically driven across-the-board tax cuts for the sake of it. Though I do think there are many, many businesses out there, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, which we highlight and champion here on The Money, who have been hammered by lockdown, they've been hammered by sky-high energy bills, they've been hammered by falling purchasing power among consumers, falling retail sales, the hospitality sector, for instance. And for them to raise corporation tax from 19 to 25% next year just seems to be mad when they're trying to survive. If we kill off businesses, then that will boost inflation because there'll be less supply coming through. So how about we maybe limit the freezing of corporation tax where it is to companies that have a turnover of less, say, than £250,000? We could do that, right?
I think we can, and what you're talking about, as I say, is a specific response there. But the key question is, and this sounds awful, should businesses survive? Which businesses should survive into our new economy? Because the thing is, at the moment, apparently, we all want to get on a plane and fly away. We all want to eat out, and there's not enough people to serve us in the pub, for example. But that will eventually work its way through into a different kind of an economy. So the question is, awful as it always sounds, and we sit here as economists, and I understand it's people's lives, but there's a
with a dismal scientist.
Well, it is, and also it's a horribly imprecise science. It's not really a science at all.
Andrew O'Brien, you're welcome to the studio. You're from Social Enterprise UK. You've done some work with the Westminster think tank, the Social Market Foundation, particularly on corporation tax. And I think I'm right in saying you disagree with me. You're concerned about the idea of freezing or even lowering corporation tax from 19%. To remind viewers and listeners again, we're on course. It's legislated for Sunak's last budget, a 19% to a 25% increase in corporation tax next April, the next fiscal year. What's your thought?
I think I agree with what you said at the beginning, Liam, which is that targeted tax cuts, definitely. But I think what we found with our research with Social Market Foundation on corporation tax cuts was that between 2010 and 2018, we did cut it quite considerably, and we didn't get any benefit from that. Investment didn't really go up. In fact, only in 1 year did the amount of business investment increase higher than the cost of the tax cut itself. And for productivity, wages, again, we didn't see a huge amount of impact from that. I think some of the measures which the Treasury's been looking to do, so things like the super deduction, there have been discussions about full capital expenses.
So just to explain, sorry, Andrew, a super deduction allows a business, or encourages a business to invest more because it can deduct the cost of that investment partially against its overall tax bill.
Exactly. That kind of targeted tax cut, again, we've been looking at some of the changes to VAT around green investment, for example. That's quite positive, and that's a sensible idea. I think some of what you were saying around SMEs, social enterprises, most of them are SMEs. We would very much be in favour of tax cuts around national insurance, business rates, things which would directly help the bottom line. But corporation tax, it's a very blunt instrument, and there's no evidence to suggest, both here in the UK or the United States or any developed economy, that actually cutting corporation tax really does boost productivity or boost investment.
It sends a signal, though, doesn't it, Roger Bootle, these international tables of ease of doing business. We will go from sort of one of the lowest corporation taxes in the G7 to among the very highest. It's not... Is that really what we want to convey? We're meant to be an entrepreneurial, swashbuckling, post-Brexit, sunlit upland kind of a place. Yet corporation tax, suddenly it's going up by 6 percentage points.
I think it's dangerous. And, of course, it was conceived in a very different world when America was putting corporation tax rate up and there was this international agreement to have a minimum rate of corporation tax. So I can see why Sunak proposed what he proposed. But now I think is the time to rethink all this. The great illusion, of course, is that corporation tax is paid by corporations. These things are just a form of illusion that stand between the government and
They go on prices. It's inflationary. So to not do it is not inflationary.
Exactly. Or investment or something or other. Now, I would actually be moving in exactly the opposite direction.
You'd actually slash corporation tax.
And the other problem with corporation tax, of course, it's so unfair and distortionary because, as you've hinted, lots of big companies manage to avoid it.
They do.
And the local small
guys,
companies do not.
It's straight off their
So
bottom
my
line.
approach to that would be to lower the rate of corporation tax.
Interesting. We will carry on with this vital discussion. Are tax rises inflationary, as Rishi Sunak says? Or is the Chancellor, for all his financial background and sophistication, plain wrong? I think he is. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We will keep this discussion ongoing after the break with my expert panel. Stay with us.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back. It's 1:21 here on GB News TV, DAB plus digital radio and online. You are On the Money and we are discussing the economic conundrum at the centre of this Tory leadership contest. That is, are tax cuts inflationary? Because that's what former Chancellor Rishi Sunak claims, and the other candidates say that he is wrong. Helen Thomas, let's come back to you. You are CEO of Blonde Money Financial Consultancy. You've worked at the top of the Conservative Party over the years. the politics of this is a bit strange, isn't it? Because you've got Liz Truss, a former Lib Dem Remainer, angling for tax cuts, and you've got Rishi Sunak, who famously said he had a picture of Margaret Thatcher on his wall as a poster when he was a kid, and he's saying, no, we can't do tax cuts, we have to be responsible. It's almost as if Conservative Party politics has been inverted.
Well, it's also rather a confected row and an attempt to draw a dividing line, as they're obviously in this...
Clear blue water.
Yeah, to be the Prime Minister. When, to be quite honest, there should be more focus on what Rishi Sunak did as Chancellor.
Yeah.
And whether he did the right thing at the right time.
And he stoked taxes. How do you feel as a Conservative that taxes are heading for their highest levels since Clem Attlee after the Second World War? I
grew up as a proud Thatcherite. But I also worked under...
There weren't many of them in Blackpool in your day.
There were not many of those in Blackpool in the 1980s. But I worked under George Osborne, David Cameron, as they were pursuing fiscal austerity and sound money. But I would now say this is a different world. This is totally different to those worlds, OK? So this as I mentioned before, pandemic, war, plus huge structural shift to the economy. Now, where I believe Sunak went wrong was to act as if he was constrained. Was to be told by the Treasury, you've got to get it all under control. These are things that are actually opportunities. These are opportunities to say, right, I want a new productive growth for the economy. We are going to reduce the cuts on SMEs because we believe they are, the workhorse of our economy. Or we also think that we might slap a luxury good VAT tax because we want to rebalance somehow and try and maybe bring more people out of tax at the bottom of the pay scale. There's all sorts that you could be doing, and it's time to actually grasp the initiative and say what sort of economy, political economy, you want. And in a way, actually, this row is getting bogged down in numbers, which is sort of allowing Rishi and his spreadsheets to take a commanding role, when really we should question the underlying view of what these guys think the economy should look like.
But in the end, Andrew O'Brien, you're from Social Enterprise UK. You've done some work with the Social Market Foundation think tank. You're against corporation tax. You're basically supporting the upcoming increase in corporation tax. You think to scrap that or even reverse it, as Roger Bootle would want, would be irresponsible. I mean, Helen's right, isn't it? We're bogged down in numbers and spreadsheets, but the key thing about all these numbers and spreadsheets is they're all forecasts. We're all licking our finger and sticking it in the air and trying to capture the economic wind, aren't there? It strikes me, on a common sense basis, that there are lots and lots of businesses struggling. I put it to you. They've been hammered by lockdown. They've been hammered by massive increases in their cost base. You've got producer price inflation. I bang on about it on this show because almost no one else in the mainstream media seems to understand what it is. The price of goods and services that firms need to create the goods and services that they then sell us. 22.1%, right, on the last numbers in May. Astonishing. Haven't companies had enough? Do they really need more corporation tax? We're going to kill off thousands of companies.
I think... I wouldn't say it's irresponsible, but I would say it's ineffective. I think that's the point. I mean, the outturn data doesn't lie. What we found is that corporation tax doesn't boost investment, it doesn't boost wages, it doesn't boost productivity. So what is it really doing? I agree with you that we need to be sending the right signal to companies and showing that we're on their side, but it's just a question of means. And I think, again, if we're looking at areas around national insurance, for example, reducing the cost of employing people, if we're looking around our capital allowances and depreciation, making it more attractive to invest. If we also look at, I think the key point as well is that tax cuts, that's not really the problem in the UK economy. We actually, as you I'm sure you know, Liam, we've got pretty competitive tax rates globally. And
pretty complex. Our tax code's like the longest in the Western world. It's like J.R.R. Tolkien on speed. It's thousands of pages.
Well, indeed.
Try complying with it.
Well, indeed, a lot of our members do struggle with that. But I think it is a bit of a fancy, though, to think that tax cuts will alone solve the structural problems. I mean, what our members would say is the fundamental problem in UK PLC is a cultural problem. It's a governance problem. For too many years, we've underinvested in people, in plant, in ideas and innovation. We need to kind of change the governance of our companies to encourage them to think long-term. That would be more effective.
OK, cut corporation tax for a company if that money that would have gone to corporation tax is channelled into training.
Well, exactly.
That's going to help their cash flow.
Well, if you cut taxes on social enterprises, for example, our members or cooperatives or SMEs that you're talking about, absolutely, that money will flow straight back into the economy. But if you're cutting it for frankly, a lot of large multinational firms, they're just going to pocket it and go, thanks very much.
That is why I'm almost interviewing myself.
You've got some good ideas.
It's when you got your own show. I mean,
you should go on Sky News, because the others don't want to talk on there.
That's why I think the corporation tax should be frozen or even reduced, as Roger says, under a certain threshold for companies of less than £250,000 or even £500,000 turnover.
Well. I think legal form is very important.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, we have a lot of as you say, very complicated legally structured firms. We should be focusing on those social enterprises, those SMEs, those cooperatives, which are a big part of our economy, hundreds of thousands of them, which are the backbone of our high streets. And if we cut taxes for them, that money would be straight back into people's pockets.
Roger, let's turn to you again. You're a very experienced economist. You were one of Ken Clarke's wise men. There were some wise women as well, even back then, in the early 90s. You've watched politics at the highest level for a very long time. What do you make of the politics of this? Do you think it's a contrived row, as Helen Thomas says?
Well, I'm both appalled and fascinated. And if Rishi gets the job, I'm going to be really interested to see how the relationship pans out between him and his Chancellor, whoever that may be.
Yeah.
You see, I think there's an argument that Rishi was captured by the Treasury, by the senior officials, and he's placed too much emphasis on getting the borrowing numbers and the debt numbers down. I understand the principle. It's not that they're crazy, these people. They're right. It's all a matter of balance and seeing the wider picture. And my experience is they don't see the wider picture. And it's going to be interesting to see if Rishi is in number 10, where he's confronted by the wider picture, how he relates to his Chancellor. And I think a lot of the problem here is that Conservative governments, including this one, just aren't grown up about how to get lower tax. The way to get lower tax is you've got to prioritise it. You've got to put it up front and then make the spending decisions consistent with the tax. We don't do that. What happens? We pour money out, we promise this, we do HS2, we do the triple lock, all the money spews out, and then subsequently we say, oh, we've got a bit of a problem with borrowing, we have to put taxes up. This is crazy.
And that does come partly from conviction, even the dreaded I-word ideology. You have to want lower taxes and think that they are the priority, and the rest of what you do has to dance to that tune, rather than the tax rate being an outcome based on your spending.
Absolutely. And I think that drive must come from the Prime Minister. That's why I'm interested to see how Rishi would behave, because it's the Prime Minister who must knock all the heads together of the various spending departments and make it absolutely clear that if we have to go for these tax cuts, which the government has said it wants, then the following consequences must take place. Now, that didn't occur under Boris Johnson. You've got some pretty wasteful spending. He seemed to believe in the magic money tree.
Indeed. And what's your general thought, Roger, briefly? I'm going to ask the other two as well, briefly. How optimistic or pessimistic are you about the UK economy as we go into the autumn? There's lots of talk about markets correcting. There's lots of surveys about falling consumer sentiment.
Yeah, I'm pretty concerned, and the Bank of England is finally going to be putting interest rates up, I think, by a fair old whack, finally. So the housing market looks vulnerable. Yeah, I'm concerned in the short term, but, you know, we're pretty resilient. I think at some point or other, next year or the year after, we'll bounce back.
Pretty difficult economic in-tray for number 10 and the new Prime Minister?
Well, as I say, though, crises create opportunities as well. This is actually a chance to do some astonishing things. I mean, Boris Johnson's administration did some pretty unconservative things, if you like. But let's define what conservatism is in this new economy. And I agree with the idea that we're headed for a tricky few months in terms of economic growth. But we have to get away from thinking we're in any kind of normal cycle. This is going to be volatile. It's going to be jumpy. We could have... You know, look, the price of oil was negative 2 years ago. Then it spiralled up to decade highs. Now it's come off a little bit. But I
haven't seen prices of petrol and diesel fall, though, have you?
Yeah, your favourite topic, Liam.
Crikey.
Your favourite topic. I'm just saying we should get... We shouldn't think, oh, there's a recession. We'll think there's a period of lower growth and a period of higher growth, and we've got to just shake it down. It'll take years to
Got to leave it there. Helen Thomas, CEO of Blonde Money. Andrew O'Brien, great to have you in the studio of Social Enterprise UK. Look forward to welcoming you back another time. And indeed, Roger Bootle. There you have it, a grown-up discussion with people who really know their stuff. That's what we do, because you are on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, should the next Prime Minister prioritise tackling poverty as the cost of living crisis escalates? We speak to the Centre for Social Justice for their take on the issue. That's after the GB News headlines once more with Rosie Wright.
A very good afternoon to you. It is 1:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Temperatures are edging towards record levels across England and Wales, with a high of 34.8 degrees recorded in Charlwood in Surrey this lunchtime. A Met Office red extreme heat warning is in effect as temperatures are forecast to hit up to 40 Celsius. Police have warned of the dangers of bathing in open water to keep cool after the body of a 13-year-old boy was found in the River Tyne. Schools in several counties, including Nottinghamshire and Hampshire, were closed today, or they'll finish early this afternoon. Cancellations have been announced on the railway network and some speed restrictions are in place. Well, the heatwaves across the continent. Authorities in Spain and Portugal say more than 1,000 people have been killed in the high temperatures, which have lasted nearly a week. Firefighters in Spain, France and Greece are also battling wildfires, which have been exacerbated by the dry conditions. In UK political news, the field of candidates in the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader will be whittled down today as Tory MPs vote in the third secret ballot of the contest. The candidate with the fewest votes will be eliminated. We'll have more at 8 p.m. A third televised debate between the candidates has been cancelled because Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss declined to take part. Sky News, which are due to be host it tomorrow evening, say Conservative MPs are said to be concerned about the damage the debates are doing to the image of the party. A Conservative police and crime commissioner has been banned from driving for 6 months for repeatedly speeding. Caroline Henry was caught breaking a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit 5 times in 12 weeks. She was elected as Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Commissioner in May 2021 and pledged to crack down on speeding. DAB, online and TV, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.196 and 1.180 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,432 and 35 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back. It's 1:36 and you are on the money. Now, tackling poverty should be a top priority for the new Prime Minister. So says a new national survey from the Centre for Social Justice think tank. The CSJ's poll, conducted by Opinium, suggests that 3/4 of the public agree that tackling poverty should be the focus for the next Tory leader. Along with poverty, family breakdown, criminal reoffending and educational underattainment costs the UK economy an estimated £100 billion each and every year. And in their new report, Repairing Our Society, the CSJ sets out ideas to tackle poverty while recognising the potential gains for the public finances, which could indeed help fund future tax cuts. Well, joining me now to run through some of these findings is Christina O'Doney, Head of Family Policy at the CSJ. More than welcome, Christine. Great to have you here on The Money with us. And I'm still here in the studio with Helen Thomas, CEO of Blonde Money. So, Christina, tell us about the report. I think, like people want motherhood and apple pie, we don't want the least fortunate in our society to suffer. We want to tackle poverty, of course we do. But what the CSJ is saying, it's looking also not just at poverty alleviation. The focus of your think tank's activities over many years now, you're also looking at the economic benefits to getting on top of those poverty problems.
Absolutely. So we're not looking, as the candidates are doing, at expensive tax cut pledges. They sound good, but we think you have to go well beyond that to look at the deep-rooted, the long-term drivers of poverty. And basically at the heart of that is family breakdown. The Relationship Foundation found that the overall cost of family breakdown amounts to £51 billion. If you think about homelessness, substance misuse, if you think about the cost of social services and mental health care, they're all wrapped up in family. And what we have found in the past is that politicians were always very, very uncomfortable with talking about families, whereas the voters really, they believe in family, they believe in stable families. And that's what our latest manifesto found. We asked 2,000, opinion polling asked 2,000 adults about what they felt was the number one reason for our present breakdown Britain, so to speak. And over 3 in 4 said that if we could reduce family breakdown, we would be addressing the big social crisis in our lives. And over 1/2 of them said if we could help through taxes, if we could help married couples with children, they would be in favor of that. What do we suggest? Well, we are very happy to see that many of the candidates have raised the issue of the family, but we think it should be something that is the responsibility of somebody at a cabinet level. So a family minister who will ensure that a family test is applied to all new policies. How does this benefit the typical family in Britain? We also think that our tax system has been really, really unfair to families. So right now, if you have a 2-earner family earning £50,000, they are going to be spending on taxes less than those who are in 1-earner families, which means that those families where the parents would like to raise, one of the parents would like to raise the children, are actually kind of punished for that. So we say start taxing households, not individuals. We also want the marriage tax allowance to be changed. Why shouldn't spouses be allowed to share 100% of their tax allowance, personal tax allowance? And then we go back to childcare. Childcare is a huge issue with voters, and it's a huge issue with those, especially in disadvantaged circumstances, because of childcare issues, they can't go back to work. And so what we are saying is it's no good continuing to spend more than £5 billion on a childcare system that is still so ineffective that half of local authorities don't have the childcare places for professional families. It's no good when a third of people's income is being spent on childcare in London. I mean, that's crazy. So,
Christina, just hold it there 1 second. Christina, if I may, I just want to put some of these points to Helen. I think Christina O'Donnell is talking a lot of sense. I think there's every reason to combine allowances of couples. I would say whether they're married or not, if they're cohabiting families, comes in all shapes and sizes these days, don't they? But there's a danger, isn't there, that the state can feel too preachy, too judgmental, for all the good common sense and well-meaning behind what Christina and the CSJ are saying. She is right also in identifying that politicians are quite reluctant to talk about family structures.
Yeah,
right?
I thought that was such a fascinating point. And funny, isn't it, when we hear that the public want to talk about it. The public have identified it as an issue. Normally, politicians would love to jump on something that the public agree on. I think what we're hearing here, feeding into our earlier discussion, is how incentives shift once you change what appear to be little tweaks that seem not that important actually have a huge impact on the decisions people make in their lives. The childcare point is astonishing. The burden in Britain is so much higher, higher than in other countries.
I mean, a lot of people want it to be tax deductible, right? I mean, why shouldn't your childcare be tax deductible? It would cost the Exchequer a lot of money.
Well, this is the point again, isn't it? Is to try and look at it all in the round, because as we're hearing from this report, you know, maybe you feel you're saving money here, but it's costing you, what was your number? 100 billion.
Yeah, the related family breakdown and reoffending and so on. Christine, let's return to you just for the last minute or so. Yeah, you're a very savvy observer of the political scene. You've been writing columns for many, many years. Well worth reading as well, if I may say so. How hopeful are you that this incoming Tory government, whoever wins, does really refocus on the sort of family values that you've been talking about? You know, Kemi Badenoch, Penny Mordaunt, Rishi Sunak, they're from different areas of the Conservative Party, but they have all been touching on these subjects that you've been highlighting.
Liam, I've loved it, because last night I listened to the debate and I thought, hey, they're all using the F word and it's music to my ears.
Well, Christina O'Donnell, it's an interesting report. We focus closely on what the Centre for Social Justice does here on GB News, and particularly on my show, On the Money. It's been great to talk to you. Christina O'Donnell of the Centre for Social Justice, talking about their new report, Repairing Our Society. And great to have you with us, as ever, Helen Thomas, CEO of Blonde Money. It's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks, and today's in-depth discussion is with Michael Stewart. He's founder of a new British social media platform called YouZoob. It's aimed at Generation Z. You see what he did there? That's those born from early 1990s onwards. And YouZoob's designed to help millions of creative people showcase their work, be it music, photography, or other art forms, and to meet like-minded people and raise donations too. An accomplished actor and singer, Michael Stewart's built a platform which distinguishes between adults, teens and kids, allowing users to focus on their age-related content with parental control to protect children. He believes that for too long, UK and European tech entrepreneurs have lagged behind the US tech giants, which Stewart says should and ultimately will be subjected to wide-ranging antitrust legislation to rein in their power. So here's my interview with Michael Stewart, founder of a new UK-based social media platform, YouZoob. He's my latest guest on Money Talks. Michael Stewart, your company, YouZoob, it sounds a bit like YouTube, but with a Z in the middle, and I understand that's for Generation Z, which is broadly people born from the early and mid-90s onwards.
That's correct, yes. Well, YouZoob was formed with the name You, as in the letter U, for you, the people, and the Z was Generation Z, and the last three letters, UBE, were for tube. So hence you have YouZoob.
So what's the difference between you and indeed YouTube? What are you trying to achieve here that the big tech giants, the social media giants, frankly, haven't already achieved?
Well, I'm coming from a personal perspective, a creative perspective. I've been involved in various forms of arts, Guildford Acting School, singing, creative areas, and regarding authorship, I've written Shakespeare for children. So the app was created with creativity in mind.
I think so often, as somebody who performs live music myself, it's hard to get your stuff out there, isn't it? It's YouTube and the social media in general. It's a pretty difficult environment, particularly for young people. So what is it about YouZoob that you hope can harness creativity and give particularly younger people a better, safer experience, perhaps a more lucrative experience as they put their stuff out, if it's live music performances, if it's photography, other types of artistic content out there for the world to see?
Well, YouZoob is basically for the creative people. Of course, you can take any subject and make it creative, but the creative aspect is so people can upload their content in a micro form to begin with, and photographs, of course, and get exposure for their creativity, but at the same time, possibly get some gift funding for it from people who are following those artists or creative makers.
Because at the moment, a lot of people creating content, they'll ask for donations on sites like Patreon. Others are available, of course. But your model combines getting your stuff out there with raising finance for it.
Well, yes, there's also a gift platform on there. So if a follower of a YouTuber decides they like that content that the creator has created, then they may well want to gift them some small amounts of money, which will help the creator to move forward.
So tell us about your journey and where your business currently is as we speak today here in the GB News studio.
Okay, well, YouZoob was created about 2.5 years ago, just before lockdown. And as lockdown came along with COVID, I decided to put all my energy into YouZoob and start to have it developed, both in iOS and Android. It's been a long journey, about 2 years, with a lot of help and discussions with my Indian-based team, who I discovered, a company called Fully Stop, who have been very good at what they're doing. And we are about 10 days away from launching the app as it is. We'll launch Android first, and then we'll go on to iOS in about a month's time.
And what are you hoping for as you launch the app? How quickly do you think YouZoob could grow? And what's your unique selling point? Why should people bother to download your app onto their smartphone amidst the sea of other apps that are out there?
Yeah, there are a lot of apps out there, but they're not necessarily creative apps. You've got the major big tech apps which cover influencing, this kind of thing. But my app, first of all, has a unique selling point with separating the channels for kids, teens and adults. Kids with parental guidance, so they won't be allowed on the platform unless the parent is monitoring the channel. Then you have a teens channel, and then you have the adult section. So they are directed at 3 different groups, and those groups can aim their content to their subscribers or their followers. And there is another part of the app which allows the user, or rather the YouTuber, to upload their content and choose what areas they want their product or their creative videos or images exposed to. They can choose a particular interest before they upload or while they're uploading to focus their creativity to.
It sounds to me like a bespoke version of what YouTube are doing, obviously you've got humble beginnings, and you haven't got Google behind you, of course, own YouTube. But it strikes me you're trying to make the process of putting your own creative content out there for other people around the world to see. You're trying to put it on a platform that is aged, segregated, allows people to more specifically target where their content is created, and allows them all within the same app to raise some money from viewers and listeners at the same time. Is that roughly right?
That's pretty much it. And also there will be a UAds feature, or there is a UAds feature, which allows the creator to advertise their content to potential clients, customers, or just people who want to follow them. So they won't only just have their own user channel, they will have an opportunity to promote their product.
Why is it, Michael, that the social media giants, the real titans of this new internet age, are pretty much all American? There's a few Chinese ones, there's a few Russian ones we don't know so much about here in the Western world. But where are the Brits? Where are the Europeans?
Well, this is the big question, a great question, but they seem to be few and far between. I am a risk taker. I am, how can I say, I am not afraid of a challenge, but definitely there needs to be some more creative tech product coming out of Great Britain. I think a lot of the lack of product or apps per se, from a larger perspective, is because the funding.
And he's right. That was Michael Stewart, founder of YouView, a made-in-Britain social media platform. And he's setting out on a long journey to try and take on the tech giants at their own game. You can listen to the full version of that interview, plus dozens of other extended Money Talks interviews now on my Money Talks podcast, on the GB News YouTube channel, or via the GB News app, or any podcast provider. Lots of you have been writing in today. That's another reason it's good to be back, because I love to get your emails and tweets, so keep them coming. Pat says, Rishi Sunak gave too much without proper checks, but Labour scares me. I've lived under them before, and there is never anything left after they leave office. So let's get the tax bill down and let's get cracking, says Pat. John weighs in. There's quite a lot of room for tax cuts, says John. What about the enormous amount of cash coming in from VAT on fuel? The government could comfortably reduce the price by around 30 pence per litre, says John. Graham says, great to see Roger Bootle with Liam today. Always a voice of reason and common sense. I hope he can become a guest more often. I fully agree, Graham. One of Britain's leading and most articulate economists in my long experiences, Roger. And I have to say, I quite like this one. Stephen reckons Liam Halligan for Chancellor. At least he makes sense. Well, Stephen, that ship's probably sailed. I've probably upset them too much over the years. Thanks for writing in today. It's been great to be back with you here on The Money. That's all we've got time for. Join me from tomorrow at 1 p.m. where I'll be continuing to discuss the cost of living crisis and helping you to beat the squeeze. This is Liam Halligan on GB News, and that was On The Money.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. The Met Office have in force a red warning for extreme heat and an amber warning for much of southern Scotland, England, as well as Wales. Unprecedented temperatures are expected. That's why there's a big fuss about this. We've never recorded temperatures as high in the UK as this plume of extremely hot air moves up. They've had red warnings in France, they've had red warnings in Portugal this week, yellow and orange warnings in Spain. So much of Western Europe under this heat. For many parts of the UK, it's a sunny day and it's warm in Scotland, warm in Northern Ireland, but the highest temperatures, plus 35 or higher, expected across much of England and Wales, 38 Celsius in one or two spots. It's going to get even hotter than that on Tuesday, and actually very little relief from the heat. Overnight tonight, it could be the UK's warmest night on record, and it's because of that extraordinary daytime heat and temperatures from Glasgow down to Southampton staying up above 20 Celsius and in some places staying at 25, 26, 27 degrees all night. It's because of those exceptional levels of heat by day and by night that we are most concerned. There will be people who struggle to cool down in this heat. Some people will be okay. That's fine, but a lot of people, I think, will suffer, given that we haven't experienced heat as extreme as this before in the UK. And then the peak expected on Tuesday, 40 to 41 Celsius expected between London and Lincolnshire. 31 there for Glasgow, 34 for North East England, South East Scotland. It could be Scotland's hottest day on record, as well as the UK's hottest day, and Wales and England, everywhere except for Northern Ireland, where high 20s are expected. Some showers come along later on Tuesday from the southwest, and that marks a change back to more typical weather for the UK. So a showery day on Wednesday, bright spells to end the week, and temperatures much closer to average.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.